All right, now we're just going to go into now trying to find these ratios where you're given some information, and we're going to find these two. Okay, so now the first thing you always want to do is find out the quadrants. Okay, the first thing is what quadrants am I in? Okay, so the quadrants. Now the quadrants are going to be determined by the sign. Okay, quadrant. This is a sign, and this is a positive fraction. So it's a sign positive. Well, sign positive I know is in quadrant 1 and in quadrant 2. Okay, so that helps me. So now I can draw my triangle, and I know this is the opposite, so I'll put O because it's sine, and this is my hypotenuse. And the opposite is 4, which is right here. And you can put theta down there, it helps go. And this is 5. And you need to find this other side, so you do your Pythagoras theorem. 5 squared take away 4 squared, and we get 3. Now I can answer this question. Well, cos is A over H. And it's going to be 3 over 5. Okay? And I don't have to worry about checking CAS because it's in quadrant 1. I know everything is positive. And if I did the tangent one, it's O over A, which is 4 over 3. Okay? Now, with this one, you have to have a check on this one. So I'm just going to show you a little thing here, because the word and, well, when you see the word and, it's going to be in a specific quadrant, because it's asking cos 5 over 13, and the angle is in quadrant 14, or quadrant 4, pardon me. So I wouldn't put it in 1 and 4, because that's what this would be, but it's going to be in quadrant 4. So I'm just going to show you what I call a double check. Okay, double check. And this is really important when you're doing these sort of problems. Okay, it's called the double check. Okay, so what we do with the double check is this. Now, if I have a sign that's given, and let's say it's greater than 0, all right, and, so remember the word and, because the word and will tell us it's a double check, because it's going to be in one specific quadrant. And let's say cot is less than 0. So what I would do if I was given this information is I do my little checklist. Okay? So tan greater than 0, that means, sin greater than 0 means it's going to be a sin positive, right? So there, check, there, check. And, so there's the word and, cot, which is tangent, less than 0. So that means it's going to be a tan negative. So if I do know my casserole, add sugar to coffee, it's here and it's here. So do you notice that in quadrant 2 you have 2 check ticks, right? So your answer is only going to be in that quadrant. So that's where you draw your triangle. Okay, so it's very important you understand the and in this question. Okay, so getting back to the question, so we know it's positive, so it's here and here, but then it says and in quadrant 4, well, right there. So there's the 2 check marks. So I know that this answer is going to lie in quadrant 4, because my triangle is in quadrant 4. So there's my triangle. Okay. Now I have my adjacent, which is 5. I have my hypotenuse. I should label that because it's good to label, because sometimes when you're doing these tests, you slip up because it's just really easy mistakes. So if you label, you can visually see what's going on. And 13 goes there. So we do our Pythagoras, 13 squared, take away 5 squared, and we get 12. Okay. Now I can answer all these questions. So I'll just do a secant one. I'll do this one right here. Well, secant is the flip of cos. Cos is a over h. So this is h over a. So my h is 13, and my a is 5. And let's do a sin one. Sin is o over h, so it's 12 over 13. Okay? Now, which one's positive, which one's negative? Well, if I'm in quadrant 4, remember this is add sugar to coffee, I'm in the C quadrant. So this is positive, so keep that one positive. But this one is negative, so put a negative sign on the numerator. Okay, so there's my 2 answers for those guys. Okay, here's a good question. It's got the checklist because you got the word and. So this is a cos negative. Check mark. Check mark. And sine greater than 0, which means sine positive. Check. Check. So I know my triangle is in this quadrant right here. So I draw it there. My adjacent is 5. You could put negative, but I avoid negatives because it messes up people with the Pythagoras. And you do your Pythagoras, and you can see a pattern. I'm using the same sort of triangle all the time. Is that, and then you go ahead and answer your questions. Okay, so I want you to try this one on your own, but I'll give you a hint. When it says find all possible, that means from 0 to 360. Okay, so you're trying to find all the angles of A that are between 0 and 360. That's what all means. Okay, so first thing always is develop a picture, because if you don't have a picture, you're going to be have some difficulties. Okay, so what quadrant am I going to put this in? Well, it's a sine and it's positive. Okay, so sine positive I know is in quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. Okay, so let's just put that in. All right, let's put our information in. So we have root 2 there, and that's our hypotenuse, and we got 1, and I know this is 1, and so I have to find that angle, which is 45. All right. Okay, now, what are we trying to solve here? We're trying to find all the possible values of secant. Okay, there's what we're trying to find, all the ones for secant. Well, we know secant to be h over a, right? Because it's the flip of cos. Well, if we look at our diagram over here, hypotenuse is the 2, the root 2, and our adjacent is 1, so we can write it as just the square root of 2. Now secant is positive in this quadrant and negative in that quadrant. So make sure you put a plus and a minus. So I'll give you a big hint. When you see this between 0 and 360, your answers are always going to be plus minus. Okay, so this one is very similar to the one we just did. Okay, but instead of finding all, it told me that. So we have to make this into a fraction, you guys, because we need this to be in fraction form because we need to know what h and a is, because if we're dealing with secant, we know this is the h and this is the a. Because without those two pieces, we can't get the puzzle. Okay, so now what quadrant are we doing these in? Well, if we have a secant and it's negative, well, in other words, we have a cos that's negative, I know it's going to be in this quadrant and in this quadrant. Okay? So there's my triangles. Okay. Now, let's just get a different color because it's getting messy. All right. So let's just label what we have. Okay, the hypotenuse is 2. Don't put a negative there, just say 2. And the adjacent's 1. Okay, now we need to find this other side, so we do some Pythagoras. 2 squared, take away 1 squared, equals 3. And then, of course, we always square root at the end of Pythagoras. And there it is. Okay, we don't worry about that angle. We know what the angle is going to be. It's 60, but I'm asking for angles. Okay, so now we need to find cot. Well, cot is the flip of tan, so it's A over O. And our adjacent is 1, and our opposite is root 3. And I told you the last slide, when you see this 0 to 360 business, it means plus and minus, because tan is negative in that quadrant and tan is positive in that quadrant. Okay? Now I want you to try this one. This one has the word and in it. So you can pause this and just do it on your own and check my answer. Okay, this one I would definitely get the picture drawn. So we have to do a checklist because we've got the word and. So we have a cos negative. So check mark, and sine negative, check mark. So now we know it's in quadrant 3. That's where it's got the 2 check marks. And now we label A and H. So we have 1 and we have 5. We do our Pythagoras, which is 25 take away 1, which is root 24. This is one that can be rationalized and broken down. I know 2 numbers right off my head. 4 times 6 is 24. And this guy's the perfect one. Square root of 4 is 2. Okay, so that breaks down to 2 root 6. Okay, now I have my picture developed. Now it's time to find the values for cosecant, so which is H over O. It's really important to write this step down because I tell you more mistakes are made on tests and things I mark because they get them mixed up with A and H and stuff like that. So always write it down. It's very important. So it's 5 over the opposite, which is 2 root 6. Now what do I have to do is make sure I check the cast rule because you don't want to miss your positive and negatives out. So add sugar. I'm in the tan quadrant, and this is a sign question, so just put the negative on top, and you're done. And that's the end of Learning Guide 5.